The first thing I noticed about Clara wasn't her beauty, though that came later like a quiet aftershock. It was the way she moved. Deliberate, unhurried, like someone who'd lived enough to know time bends when you stop chasing it. Her son, my friend Mark, had begged me to help her move into her new townhouse. Just a few boxes, he said. But Mark left halfway through to meet someone, and suddenly it was just the two of us, surrounded by the smell of cardboard, lemon polish, and the faintest trace of her perfume. Clara wore her hair tied back, though a few strands had slipped free, brushing her neck when she turned. She smiled when she caught me watching. "You don't have to stay," she said lightly, though her tone didn't quite match the words. "I don't mind," I told her. "You've got a lot left to do." She looked at the boxes stacked against the wall. Books mostly, and sighed. "I suppose I do." The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the muffled rain outside. The kind of quiet that presses on you until every sound, every small motion feels louder than it should. I could hear her bracelets slide down her wrist when she reached for another box. She grunted softly, almost to herself, and I stepped closer before I could think better of it. "Here," I said, fingers brushing hers as I took the weight. The contact was brief, accidental, but something about it lingered, a pulse that didn't quite go away. She noticed it too. I could tell by the way she hesitated before stepping back, like she'd remembered something she shouldn't. We worked in near silence after that. She unpacked, I carried, and the room slowly began to look like hers, shelves filling with novels, old photographs leaning against walls. There was a warmth creeping into the space, like her presence alone was enough to make the house exhale. At one point, she knelt beside an open box and found a framed photo. She smiled softly, a much younger version of her, sunburned and laughing, holding a glass of wine. "I used to throw these dinner parties," she said. "Too many people, not enough chairs. I thought that made it charming." "Did it?" I asked. She looked up at me then, directly. "Sometimes." Something in the air shifted. Maybe it was the way she held the frame, or how the rain slowed outside, the light turning gold against the floorboards. It felt like the room was holding its breath. When we finished, she poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "You've done enough," she said softly. But her hand stayed out a moment too long, her fingers brushing my wrist before she let go. I should have left then. I even stepped toward the door, shoes already in hand. But her voice stopped me. "You're not leaving yet, are you?" The way she said it, low, uncertain, almost careless, made my pulse skip. I turned. She was leaning against the counter, arms folded, eyes on the floor. Then she looked up, and for a second, there was nothing motherly or polite about the way she watched me. "I could use help with the curtains," she added after a pause, though the faint smile on her lips said otherwise. I took a step closer, still barefoot, the sound of rain against the window filling the space between us. Then a knock. Sharp, sudden. Her head turned, startled, and the air, heavy and charged, broke. It was Mark at the door. Of course it was. He'd forgotten his jacket. The timing couldn't have been worse. Clara opened it, smiling too brightly. I stood a few feet away, pretending to adjust a stack of books, heart hammering like I'd done something wrong. Mark didn't stay long, just a few words, a laugh, the sound of rain on his shoulders, and then he was gone again. The silence that followed felt almost guilty. "Clara, shut the door softly. He never remembers anything," she murmured. Then, after a beat, "Thank you for staying." I nodded. "It's fine. I didn't have plans." She smiled faintly at that. "That's dangerous at your age, not having plans." There was warmth in her tone, but also something tired underneath, something like experience. She moved toward the living room window, fingertips brushing the curtain she'd mentioned earlier. The rain had lightened, leaving streaks on the glass like veins of silver. "Mark tells me you're not from here," she said, still looking out. "No, my parents moved a lot. I'm used to not staying anywhere long." She nodded slowly, as if that explained something she already suspected. "That doesn't sound easy." It wasn't. But I guess it teaches you not to expect people to stay either. When she turned toward me, her expression softened. "That's not something you should learn so young." The air between us changed again, less charged, more intimate, like a small wound had been exposed. She came closer, reached for the edge of the curtain, and I instinctively raised my hand to help. My fingers brushed against hers again. Light, unintentional, but deliberate enough that neither of us moved away right away. Her skin was cool, smooth, the kind of touch that makes you forget what you were about to say. She cleared her throat first, pulling her hand back. "I'm sorry," she said softly, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. The touch, the tension, or something much older. "Don't be," I said too quickly. She looked at me then, properly, and the age difference between us became something real, not just imagined. There was a history in her eyes, a fatigue that belonged to someone who'd loved deeply once and lost more than she wanted to admit. "You remind me of someone," she said finally. "Someone good." She smiled faintly. "Someone who used to look at me like that." I didn't know what to do with that. The weight of it. I looked away, but the reflection of her in the window stayed, watching me with that same soft ache. The curtains slipped from her hand, the fabric grazing my arm as it fell. She reached out to smooth it, but her fingers caught my sleeve instead. A second too long, a breath too close. I could smell her, a trace of soap, rain, and something faintly floral. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't clear if she meant for the curtain, the company, or the unspoken thing we were both pretending not to name. Neither of us stepped back. The moment held, fragile, dangerous, and entirely ours. The next time I saw her was 3 days later. Mark had gone out of town for the weekend, and Clara texted a short, practical message. "Could you help me with the shelves? They're heavier than I thought." I almost didn't go, but I did. She opened the door in an oversized sweater, sleeves falling over her wrists, barefoot on the wooden floor. The house smelled like coffee and rain again. She smiled when she saw me, small, hesitant, as if she wasn't sure she should have asked. "I didn't mean to pull you away from anything," she said. "You didn't," I lied. We worked in the study, the air thick with unspoken things. Every so often, her shoulder brushed mine as we lifted a plank into place. Each accidental touch seemed to last a heartbeat too long. She kept apologizing for it. I kept saying it was fine. When she bent to pick up a screw that had rolled under the desk, her hair fell forward, and I caught myself watching the curve of her neck, the quiet grace of her movements. I looked away too late. She noticed. "You stare when you think I'm not looking," she said softly. I froze. "Sorry, don't be," she interrupted, her voice quieter now. "I just forget what that feels like sometimes." Something shifted then. The closeness stopped feeling accidental. She was standing near enough that I could feel her warmth, the faint rhythm of her breathing. My hand moved before my mind caught up, reaching to steady the shelf, but my knuckles brushed the back of hers. Neither of us moved. The sound of her phone broke the moment, the vibration against the counter sharp and sudden. She exhaled, stepping back like she'd been caught. It was Mark, a text flashing across the screen. "How's the place holding up?" She turned the phone face down. "He worries too much," she said, though her voice wasn't steady. "I think he just cares." Her eyes lifted to mine, a long look, unreadable, but full of something heavy. "That's what makes it complicated." I didn't answer. The space between us was too thin for words. She stepped closer again, slow, uncertain. My heart raced. For a second, we both leaned in, not enough to cross the line, just enough to feel the gravity of it. Her breath brushed against my cheek when she spoke. "This probably isn't smart." "No," I said, my voice low. "It's not." But neither of us moved away. The rain started again outside, soft but insistent, tapping against the glass. The half-built shelf leaned forgotten against the wall. Her hand lifted, just a fraction, as if she meant to fix a loose thread on my shirt. Instead, her fingers hovered there, trembling in the air between us. The moment could have gone either way. And then, a knock on the window. Both of us startled, turning. A neighbor waved through the glass. An older woman, friendly, oblivious, holding out a misdelivered package. When Clara opened the door, she was smiling again. Too brightly. But when she closed it, her eyes found mine, still shaken, still wanting. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. It happened on a Sunday night. The house was half lit, the kind of quiet that feels borrowed, like the world outside had paused just long enough for something to happen. Clara had asked me to stop by for just a minute, though neither of us believed it would only be that. She was sitting on the floor when I arrived, a glass of wine in her hand, papers spread around her. I was sorting old things, she said. Turns out that's harder than I thought. I crouched down beside her. Faded photos, letters, and a ticket stub from a concert long before I was even born. Pieces of a life she never talked about. Was this your husband? I asked quietly. She hesitated before nodding. He was good to me, just gone too soon. Her voice didn't crack, but her eyes did. That tiny, fragile break beneath composure. I reached for one of the photos, our fingers grazing. She didn't pull back this time. I didn't think anyone would see me like that again, she said, almost to herself. The room felt too small for everything unsaid. I could hear the ticking of the clock, the faint hum of the fridge, the sound of her breathing, slow, deliberate, almost steady. You deserve to be seen, I said. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to argue. Instead, she reached up, brushing a lock of hair from her face. My hand moved without thought, catching her wrist, holding it just long enough for her pulse to meet my thumb. Eli. My name came out as an exhale. Not a warning, not quite an invitation. I know, I murmured, but I didn't let go. She leaned closer, maybe to speak, maybe to stop me. Her knee brushed mine. Her scent, soft and warm, filled the space between us. The air was heavy with things that could ruin us both. Her eyes searched mine. This isn't fair to you, she said, her voice trembling at the edges. It's not fair to you either, I said. People talk, she whispered. And Mark, I don't care. That silenced her. Her hand, still caught in mine, relaxed slightly. I could feel her resolve unravel, thread by thread. She looked down, her hair falling forward, and I reached out to tuck it behind her ear. My fingertips lingered against her skin. The world narrowed, the glass of wine forgotten, the papers scattered like fallen leaves. Her breath hitched, her lips parting in the smallest sound, and for one suspended heartbeat, it felt inevitable, like we were standing at the edge of something we couldn't walk back from. Her eyes lifted, met mine again. Close. Too close. Eli, she whispered. If you don't step back right now, I won't. I didn't move. The silence after that was alive, louder than any confession, heavier than any kiss. And just as our foreheads brushed, a shadow crossed the window. A car door slammed outside. Mark's voice. She froze. The space between us shattered like thin glass. Mark's voice carried down the hall before we even saw him. Mom? You here? Clara shot to her feet, eyes wide, breath caught halfway between panic and guilt. I backed away, fast, pretending to study the bookshelves we'd built last week. The space where her warmth had just been still burned against my skin. In here, she called, smoothing her hair, too calm, too late. He walked in a moment later, damp from the rain, keys jingling in his hand, smiling like nothing could possibly be wrong. Didn't think you'd be up. You got company. I turned, tried to sound casual. Hey, Mun, I was just helping your mom with some stuff. Again, his grin was teasing, not suspicious, but it landed like a warning. You're becoming part of the family. Clara laughed, but sounded brittle. He's just kind, she said quickly. Something flickered in Mark's expression. A half-second pause, too sharp to miss. His eyes darted between us, reading something neither of us was ready to explain. Then, mercifully, he changed the subject, setting down his backpack and rummaging through the fridge. Clara poured herself another glass of wine, her hand trembling so slightly that I almost thought I imagined it. She didn't look at me again until he went upstairs, whistling. When the sound of his footsteps faded, she whispered he saw something. I swallowed hard. Maybe he didn't. He did. Her voice broke, barely a sound. I can feel it. We stood there, not touching but too close for comfort. She moved past me, brushing my arm as she went, the contact electric and brief. The smell of her perfume lingered after her, delicate and wrong. I should have stopped this, she said finally, standing by the counter. You're his friend. His age. What was I thinking? That you were lonely, I said. That I was too. Her breath caught, sharp, unsteady. Don't make this about sympathy. It's not. I stepped closer. It's about wanting something that can't survive daylight, she finished for me. She turned then, and for the first time, she didn't look composed. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes glistening, her lips trembling like she was holding back too many truths at once. I told myself it was harmless, she whispered. That you'd help, we'd talk, and that would be it. But now, I waited, but she didn't finish. Instead, she exhaled shakily, setting down her glass too hard. It cracked against the counter, a thin fracture running through the stem. She flinched at the sound. Mark isn't stupid, she said. If he asks, if he knows. I closed the distance then, slow, cautious. Then we tell him nothing happened. Her eyes found mine. But something has happened. We stood inches apart, the air trembling with what neither of us could say out loud. Her fingers brushed against mine, trembling, then gripped, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. Eli, she whispered, voice unsteady. If this keeps going, I'll lose him. I hesitated, my thumb brushing her knuckles, unable to let go. Then don't stop me. She shut her eyes. When she opened them again, there was something final there. Not surrender, but resolve. Tomorrow, she said. Come by tomorrow. We'll decide then. And before I could answer, she walked away, leaving the broken glass, still bleeding wine onto the counter. The next day came heavy with silence. I spent the morning pacing, half hoping she'd cancel, half terrified she wouldn't. By the time I reached her house, the sky was bruised gray, the kind of light that made everything feel like an ending. Clara opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been waiting. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept, but her voice was steady. Come in, she said. The house was different, cleaner, sharper somehow. The wine glass from the night before was gone. The air smelled faintly of soap and rain. She motioned toward the couch, but I stayed standing. We need to talk, I started. I know, she said. I've been trying to rehearse what to say, but everything sounds dishonest. Her words landed somewhere between confession and surrender. I stepped closer, slowly, until we were only a few feet apart. Then don't rehearse, I said. Just tell me the truth. She exhaled, her hands tightening at her sides. The truth is, I can't stop thinking about you. But every time I see your face, I see his too. And that, her voice faltered. That's what terrifies me. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I didn't mean to make your life harder. No, she said softly. You made me feel again. That's worse. She laughed then, a small, broken sound, and turned away, her fingers brushing her temple. I reached out instinctively, my hand finding her shoulder. She didn't move. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. My thumb traced the fabric of her sleeve, barely touching skin, yet she shivered under it. I shouldn't want this, she whispered. But you do, I said. She turned, and suddenly we were close enough that the air between us seemed to vanish. Her breath hitched, eyes flicking from my mouth to my eyes and back again. The tension was unbearable, all the weeks of restraint collapsing into one fragile second. Her hand came up to my face, fingertips trembling as they brushed my jaw. You're too young for this kind of ruin, she said, though her thumb lingered against my lips. Then ruin me, I said. Her breath caught. She closed her eyes, once slow, and leaned forward until our foreheads touched. It wasn't a kiss, but it was closer than any words could reach. I can't, she murmured. If I cross this line, I won't find my way back. Maybe you don't need to. Her lips parted, a whisper against mine, the kind of almost that burns more than contact. And just as the world began to tilt toward yes, she stepped back. Her hands fell to her sides. Her voice was quiet, but clear. This has to be the end, Eli. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we didn't say, everything we almost did. I nodded. I know. And though she turned away first, I was the one who couldn't move, standing in the doorway, understanding her completely for the first time. Weeks passed before I saw her again. Mark had moved into a new apartment closer to campus, and life resumed its polite rhythm. Texts unanswered, silence where warmth used to live. Then, one late afternoon, I saw her standing outside the cafe near the university, holding a paper bag and looking a little lost in the sunlight. She smiled when she noticed me, hesitant but real. "You look well," she said. "So do you," I answered, though she didn't. There were faint lines of tiredness around her eyes, the kind that come from thinking too much. We walked for a bit, no plan in mind, just the easy rhythm of two people who had already said everything once and didn't need to repeat it. The conversation drifted to Mark, his job, his new place, and, for a moment, it almost felt like before. Then she stopped near the park gate. "I didn't want it to end like that," she said softly. "But maybe it had to." I nodded. "I know. I just keep wondering if we were wrong, or just too scared." She looked up at me, eyes glinting in the fading light. "Maybe both." The wind picked up, stirring her hair across her face. Without thinking, I reached out and tucked it behind her ear, the same gesture that once set everything in motion. She didn't stop me. Her eyes closed for a second, and when she opened them again, the tension that had haunted us seemed to have softened into something gentler. Not denial, not longing, but quiet understanding. "Eli," she said, almost a whisper, "you changed something in me. You reminded me I'm still here, that I can still feel." I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. "You did the same for me." She smiled then, small, tired, and beautiful. And before either of us could think, she stepped closer and wrapped her arms around me. The embrace was slow, steady, not hungry, not desperate, just real. I felt her heartbeat against mine, calm now, no longer racing towards something forbidden. When she finally pulled back, her hand stayed in mine. "This is enough," she said. "It is," I answered, though a part of me wished it weren't. We stood there for a moment longer, fingers intertwined, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Then she let go first, and this time it didn't feel like loss, just the end of something that had already given us what it could. As she walked away, the world didn't feel smaller, just quieter, clearer, like something inside both of us had settled at last. I watched until she disappeared into the soft blur of evening light. Some stories don't need forever. They just need to be felt once, deeply enough to stay. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?